The allegory of the cave. Imagine being chained in a dark cave since birth. You can't turn your head. All you see are shadows moving on the wall in front of you, made by objects behind you that you can't see. You believe these shadows are reality, because that's all you've ever known. This is Plato's allegory of the cave, a story about how our understanding of the world can be limited by our experiences. In the story, one prisoner escapes and sees the outside world for the first time: sunlight, trees, real people. He realizes the shadows were just illusions, but when he returns to tell the others, they refuse to believe him. The allegory teaches us that truth might be far beyond what we can see or imagine, and that it's hard for people to accept a reality they've never experienced. The ship of Theseus. Picture a wooden ship. Over the years, each plank, sail, and rope gets replaced until none of the original parts remain. Is it still the same ship? Now imagine taking all the old parts and rebuilding them into another ship. Which one is the real ship of Theseus? This thought experiment asks what truly makes something the same over time, its physical parts or its continuous history. The idea also applies to people. Your body's cells change over the years, yet you're still you. Or are you? It challenges us to think about identity, change, and what makes something, or someone, truly the same. The trolley problem. You're standing next to a lever that can change the direction of a runaway trolley. On the track ahead, 5 people are tied down. On the side track, there's one person. If you do nothing, the trolley will kill the 5. If you pull the lever, it will switch tracks and kill one instead. What should you do? This is the trolley problem, a famous moral dilemma. It asks whether it's better to take an action that saves more lives but directly causes harm, or to do nothing and let more harm happen. Philosophers use it to explore questions about morality, consequences, and whether it's ever right to harm one to save many. Determinism versus free will. Imagine your life as a movie you're watching for the first time. Every scene feels like it's unfolding naturally, but what if the script was already written before you were even born? This is the heart of the debate between determinism and free will. Determinism says that every choice you make is the result of causes that came before, your upbringing, the laws of physics, even tiny events in the past that set things in motion. Free will says you can make genuine choices that aren't pre-decided. The question: are we truly in control of our lives, or are we just following a path already laid out for us? Existential angst. Have you ever suddenly wondered, what's the point of all this? And felt a strange, heavy feeling in your chest? That's close to existential angst. It's a deep unease that comes when you realize the universe might not have a clear purpose for you, and that you have to create your own meaning in life. Philosophers like Sartre and Kierkegaard wrote about it as part of being human, uncomfortable, but also an opportunity to shape your own path. Nihilism. Imagine waking up one day and realizing that nothing in the world has any built-in meaning, not success, not failure, not even life itself. That's nihilism. It's the belief that there's no objective purpose or value in life. For some, this sounds depressing. For others, it's freeing, because if nothing has fixed meaning, you can create your own. Friedrich Nietzsche warned that nihilism can be dangerous if it leads to hopelessness, but it can also inspire people to build new values. Solipsism. What if everything around you, the people, the buildings, the sky, existed only in your mind? That's solipsism, the idea that only your own mind is certain to exist, and everything else could just be a creation of your own consciousness. It's almost impossible to disprove completely, which makes it unsettling. But it's also a reminder to question how we know what's real. The problem of evil. If there's an all-powerful, all-good, all-knowing God, why is there so much suffering in the world? This is the problem of evil. It challenges religious belief: either God can't stop evil, doesn't know about it, or chooses not to stop it, which raises difficult questions about divine goodness. Some answers suggest that suffering teaches lessons, or that we need free will, even if it leads to bad things. But the question remains one of the biggest debates in philosophy of religion. The paradox of the heap, Sorite's paradox. If you take one grain away from a heap of sand, it's still a heap. Take away another, still a heap. But if you keep going, at some point it's no longer a heap. Where exactly does that change happen? This is the Sorite's paradox, and it shows how vague definitions can lead to strange problems. It's not just about sand, it applies to money, age, and even identity. Dualism versus monism. What is reality made of? Dualism says there are two basic kinds of things, mind and matter. Monism says there's only one, either everything is physical, or everything is mental. If dualism is true, our thoughts are something separate from our bodies. If monism is true, then thoughts and bodies are made of the same stuff. This debate shapes how we understand consciousness, the soul, and the universe. Moral relativism. Imagine two cultures with totally different moral rules. One thinks a practice is completely fine, the other thinks it's wrong. Who's correct? Moral relativism says morality depends on culture, society, or personal belief, not universal laws. Critics say this means anything goes, but supporters say it encourages tolerance and understanding. Empiricism. Imagine you only trust what you can see, touch, or measure, like tasting food to know if it's sweet. Empiricism is the idea that knowledge mainly comes from sensory experience. People who favor empiricism say we learn about the world by observing it carefully, doing experiments, and testing ideas. This matters because it underpins modern science and the idea that claims should be checked against evidence. Rationalism. Picture solving a puzzle in your head before trying it out, using logic and reason to arrive at truths. Rationalism claims that some knowledge comes primarily from reason and thinking, not just from the senses. Rationalists point to math and logic as examples where we can know things clearly through thought alone. It matters because it shows another route to truth, not just observation but clear thinking and deduction. Utilitarianism. You must choose between two plans, one helps 100 people a little, the other helps 2 people a lot. Utilitarianism says pick the action that creates the greatest overall happiness, or least suffering, for the most people. It judges actions by their consequences, not by fixed rules. This idea is useful for public policy and difficult moral choices because it focuses on results and overall welfare. Deontology. Imagine you promise not to lie, even if lying would save someone's feelings. Deontology says some actions are right or wrong based on rules or duties, regardless of the outcome. A deontologist cares about whether you followed a moral rule, not just the consequences. This matters because it highlights principles like rights and obligations, which can conflict with outcome-based thinking. Virtue ethics. Think about what makes someone a good person, not which action is right in one case, but what kind of character they have. Virtue ethics focuses on building virtues, like courage, kindness, honesty, so you naturally act well. Instead of rules or consequences, it asks, what kind of person should I become? This matters because it makes moral life a practice of personal growth, not just rule following. Social contract. Imagine people living in chaos agree to make rules so everyone is safer. The social contract idea says governments and laws are formed by an agreement, explicit or implied, between people to give up some freedoms in return for security and order. It helps explain why authority can be legitimate and why citizens owe duties to the state. This matters for understanding rights, laws, and why societies form. Hedonism. Picture a life focused on pleasure and avoiding pain. Hedonism claims pleasure, and the absence of pain, is the highest good and main aim of life. Some versions focus on simple pleasures, others distinguish between short-term pleasures and deeper, long-term well-being. It matters because it forces us to ask what happiness really means and whether pleasure alone makes life valuable. Stoicism. Imagine you lose something important but stay calm and focus on what you can control. Stoicism teaches accepting what you cannot change and living virtuously, controlling your reactions rather than external events. Stoics practice self-control, resilience, and focusing energy on wise choices. It matters because it's a practical guide to reduce anxiety and build inner strength. Absurdism. Think about hunting for deep meaning and finding none, yet choosing to live anyway. Absurdism says humans naturally seek meaning in a world that may be indifferent or meaningless. This clash is the absurd. Instead of despair, absurdists, like Camus, suggest embracing life's experiences without false hope. It matters because it frames how people face hopeless situations and still create personal meaning. Phenomenology. Have you ever noticed how a red apple looks, smells, and feels to you, not the science of it, but the direct experience? Phenomenology studies how things appear to consciousness, describing lived experience without assumptions. It asks, what is the structure of experience itself? This matters because it helps us understand perception, empathy, and how meaning arises in everyday life. Pragmatism. If an idea works in practice, it's useful. Pragmatism judges ideas by their practical consequences. If a belief helps you solve problems and improves outcomes, it's valuable. It treats truth as something tested by results, not just abstract proof. This matters for applying philosophy to real-world problems and for flexible thinking in uncertain situations. Foundationalism versus coherentism. When you build a belief system, where does support come from? Foundationalism says some beliefs are basic and don't need justification from others, like simple observations. Coherentism says beliefs are justified by fitting together like a web, no single base, but mutual support. This matters for understanding how we claim to know things and why some beliefs feel more secure than others. Logical positivism. Imagine a rule that says only statements verifiable by experience or true by logic are meaningful. Logical positivism argued that many philosophical claims, especially about metaphysics, are meaningless unless they can be tested or are tautologies. Though the movement faded, it shaped modern ideas about clarity, science, and what counts as meaningful talk. It matters because it pushed philosophy toward precision and empirical grounding. Moral absolutism. Think of a rule like, murder is always wrong, no matter the circumstances. Moral absolutism holds that some moral rules apply universally and never change. It gives clear answers and strong moral guidance, but can clash with complex real-life cases. It matters because it sets a firm moral baseline and raises questions about exceptions and context. Moral particularism. Now imagine deciding right and wrong case by case, with no fixed list of moral rules. Moral particularism says moral judgment depends on the specifics of each situation. There are no absolute principles that apply in every case. It highlights sensitivity to context and unique details. This matters because it challenges rule-based ethics and pushes careful, situation-aware moral thinking. Compatibilism. You want both free will and a lawful universe. Compatibilism says those can coexist, even if events have causes. Determinism, you can still act freely if your choices align with your own desires and reasons. In short, freedom means acting without external compulsion, not absence of cause. It matters because it offers a middle way for responsibility, law, and moral blame. Physicalism, materialism. Imagine reducing thoughts, feelings, and consciousness to brain activity. Physicalism claims everything that exists is physical, matter and energy, and mental states are brain processes. If true, studying the brain explains the mind. It matters because it guides science, medicine, and how we understand identity and personal change. Panpsychism. Think of consciousness not as rare but as a basic feature of matter itself. Panpsychism suggests that even simple matter may have proto-experiences, that consciousness is spread across nature at some level. It's a way to tackle how subjective minds come from physical stuff. It matters because it offers a radical alternative to seeing consciousness as only in big brains. The Gettier problem. Imagine you correctly believe the neighbor's dog is in the yard because you heard barking, but it was actually a radio. However, the dog did happen to be there by coincidence. You had true belief and good reasons, but many would say you didn't really know. The Gettier problem shows that justified true belief isn't always enough for knowledge. It matters because it forced philosophers to rethink what knowing really is. Occam's razor. When two explanations fit the facts, choose the simpler one. Occam's razor says don't multiply assumptions, favor the explanation with fewer leaps. It's not a proof, but a practical rule of thumb used in science and reasoning to avoid unnecessary complexity. It matters because it helps cut through confusion and focus on the most likely ideas. Epistemology. Imagine you hear two people arguing and you want to know who's right. Epistemology is the study of knowledge, how we form beliefs, what counts as good reasons, and how we decide something is true. It asks questions like, what does it mean to know something? Where do our beliefs come from? Sense, reason, testimony. This matters because it shapes how we trust science, news, experts, and our own thinking. Metaphysics. You wonder what kinds of things really exist. Do numbers exist like chairs do? Metaphysics deals with the basic structure of reality, existence, time, space, cause, and what kinds of things there are. It asks big questions such as, what is a thing? What is change? And what is possible? Metaphysics matters because it provides the background assumptions for science, ethics, and everyday beliefs. Ontology. Imagine sorting everything in the world into boxes, people, animals, ideas. Ontology is the part of metaphysics that asks, what categories of things exist and how are they related? It's about classifying reality, objects, properties, events, relations, and deciding what belongs in each box. Ontology matters for clear thinking, science, and how we name things in law or tech. Philosophy of mind. When you feel pain or recall a memory, what is happening inside you? Philosophy of mind studies mental life, consciousness, thoughts, intentions, and how they relate to the brain. It asks whether minds are just brains, how subjective experience works, and whether machines could ever truly think. This matters for psychology, AI, medicine, and how we treat people. Qualia. Think of the color red, there's a certain, what it's like, to see it. Those raw feels are called qualia, the subjective qualities of experience, redness, the taste of coffee. Philosophers ask whether qualia can be fully explained by brain science or if there's something extra. Qualia matter because they force us to confront the mystery of conscious experience. Functionalism. Imagine pain defined not by brain parts but by the role it plays. It causes avoidance, complaining, and discomfort. Functionalism says mental states are defined by what they do, not what they're made of. So different physical systems could have the same mental state if they play the same functional role. It matters because it opens the door to machine minds and explains mental similarities across different bodies. Identity theory, mind-brain identity. Suppose every time you feel happy, a certain brain pattern lights up. Identity theory says mental states are literally brain states, thought equals neural event. It reduces mental talk to physical brain descriptions. This matters because it ties mind to biology, shaping medicine and debates about consciousness. Emergentism. Imagine many tiny parts working together to create something new, like many ants forming an anthill mind. Emergentism says higher-level properties, like consciousness, can arise from complex systems, and these properties aren't obvious from the parts alone. The whole shows new features that the pieces don't have by themselves. It matters because it helps explain creativity, life, and how new realities appear from simple rules. Behaviorism. If we can only check what people do, not what they feel, what should science study? Behaviorism focused on observable behavior and treated talk of inner states as unnecessary. Early psychology used this to stay scientific, but critics said it ignored real subjective experience. It matters historically because it shaped experiments and the rise of cognitive science. Categorical imperative. Imagine deciding whether your action could be a rule everyone must follow. Kant's categorical imperative asks you to act only on maxims you could will to become universal law, and to treat people as ends, not merely means. This gives a rule-based ethics. Some actions are wrong regardless of outcome. It matters because it underlies modern ideas about dignity, rights, and moral duties. Moral luck. Two drivers both drive recklessly, one hits a pedestrian, the other doesn't. Are they equally blameworthy? Moral luck points out that outcomes we can't control, luck, affect how we judge moral responsibility. This challenges the idea that people should only be judged for what's under their control. It matters for law, blame, and how we assign praise or punishment. Consequentialism. If the rightness of an action depends on its results, you're thinking like a consequentialist. Utilitarianism is one type, maximize overall good, but consequentialism more generally judges acts by their outcomes. It matters because it focuses decision-making on real-world effects, useful in policy, but sometimes clashes with rights and duties. Social constructivism. Money only works because we agree it does. Social constructivism says many social facts, money, marriage, race, exist because people collectively accept rules and meanings. These things aren't just out there like rocks, they're created and maintained by human practices. It matters because it shows how changeable and negotiable many important institutions are. Essentialism. Suppose someone believes every species or thing has a hidden essence that makes it what it is. That's essentialism, the view that things have fixed, defining properties. Critics say this often oversimplifies and leads to stereotypes. It matters because it affects how we think about identity, categories, and science. Teleology. Why does the heart exist? To pump blood. That's a teleological, purpose-based, explanation. Things are explained by their end or function. Aristotle used teleology widely. Modern science sometimes replaces purpose talk with mechanical causes, but teleology still helps explain design and behavior in biology and human goals. It matters because it shapes how we explain natural and human-made things. Indeterminism. Not everything might be strictly caused. At tiny scales, events can be random. Indeterminism is the idea that some events are not predetermined, allowing genuine novelty or chance. In debates about free will, indeterminism is sometimes invoked as opening space for free choices. It matters because it challenges a purely mechanical view of the universe. Moral realism. When people say some acts are objectively right or wrong no matter opinion, they are endorsing moral realism. Moral facts exist independently of what anyone thinks. Moral realists treat ethical claims like factual claims to be discovered. It matters because it supports firm moral judgments and debates about moral truth. Emotivism, moral anti-realism. If X is wrong really means, I disapprove of X, that's emotivism, a view that moral statements express feelings or attitudes, not facts. On this view, moral talk persuades or expresses emotion rather than stating objective truth. It matters because it changes how we argue about ethics. We're exchanging feelings, not proving facts. Altruism. Someone gives their lunch to a stranger with no reward. That selfless help is altruism, acting to benefit others, sometimes at personal cost. Philosophers and scientists ask whether pure altruism exists or if selfish motives always hide behind. It matters for ethics, politics, and understanding human cooperation. Skepticism, philosophical skepticism. Imagine doubting whether any of your beliefs are really certain. Philosophical skepticism questions whether we can know things for sure, about the external world, other minds, or the past. Skeptics demand strong evidence and expose assumptions we take for granted. It matters because healthy skepticism sharpens inquiry and guards against gullibility, but extreme skepticism can be paralyzing. Veil of ignorance, Rawls. Imagine designing a society but you don't know your place in it, rich or poor, majority or minority. Rawls' veil of ignorance asks you to choose fair rules from that position of ignorance, so you protect the worst off. It's a device to reach impartial justice principles. It matters because it's a powerful tool for thinking about fairness and public policy. Prisoner's dilemma. Two suspects are arrested and separately offered deals: betray the other and go free, or stay silent and risk a worse outcome if the other betrays. The prisoner's dilemma shows how rational choices can lead to worse outcomes for everyone. It matters for understanding cooperation, politics, and economics. Eudaimonia, Aristotle's flourishing. Imagine living well, not just feeling pleasure, but fulfilling your potential. Eudaimonia is Aristotle's idea of human flourishing, a life of virtue, activity, and fulfillment. It's not a momentary mood but a full-lived good life. It matters because it shifts ethics from rules or outcomes to living well over a lifetime. A priori knowledge. Some things seem knowable without checking the world, for example, 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. A priori knowledge is knowledge we can have through reason alone, before or without experience. It matters because it shows there are different sources of knowledge, not only the senses. A posteriori knowledge. If you learn the sky is blue by looking up, that's a posteriori knowledge, knowledge from experience. It contrasts with a priori truths and grounds most scientific and everyday knowledge. It matters because it underlies experiments, observation, and empirical learning. Analytic versus synthetic distinction. Say, all bachelors are unmarried, that's true by meaning alone. That's analytic. If you say, the cat is on the mat, that's synthetic, true by how the world happens to be. The distinction helps clarify how language and facts interact. It matters for logic, language philosophy, and debates about meaning. Synthetic a priori, Kant. Kant proposed a tricky middle. Some truths, like space and time are forms of intuition, are informative about the world yet knowable without experience, synthetic a priori. These claims add content but come from the mind structure. It matters because Kant used this idea to explain how math and science can be both necessary and informative. Personal identity. What makes you the same person over time? Is it your body, memory, character, or something else? Personal identity explores what counts as continued identity through change. It matters for responsibility, legal claims, and how we think about life stories. Extended mind. If you use a notebook to store reminders, is that notebook part of your mind? The extended mind thesis says tools and environment can be parts of cognition when they play the right role. It matters for how we define thinking, design tools, and understand memory and tech. Paternalism. When the state steps in, for your own good, and restricts choices, like seatbelt laws, that's paternalism. It asks whether it's ever right to limit freedom to protect someone's welfare. It matters because it balances safety and liberty in politics and ethics. Hedonic calculus, Bentham's idea. Imagine trying to measure pleasure and pain to choose the best action. Bentham suggested a simple scorecard, the hedonic calculus, tallying intensity, duration, certainty, and extent of pleasure/pain. It's an early attempt to make utilitarian thinking practical. It matters historically for utilitarian policy and ethical calculation.